Yes! Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is today. And welcome back. I hope your weekend was just outstanding and you've returned roaring and ready to go because we have a lot of business to attend to here today. Let's do a quick mic check on this because we had a little bit of, there we go. Let's bump that puppy up a bit and get that. All right. Hopefully we're coming in loud and clear. Let me know if that's too much, but I think that's good where we're at. All right, so my friends, a bunch of stuff to get to today. We're going to the Supreme Court. We had a major victory out of the Supreme Court today, and we're going to talk about it because boy, oh boy, are they upset about this. You see, this was a 6-3 decision that came down. We've got the 6 conservative judges on one side and the 3 liberal judges on the other side, and this time, they didn't let Ketanji write a dissent, okay? They took away her computer. She got grounded after the last couple of dissents where she was ... wait for it, embarrassing, full stop. But now this was assigned over to a better judge, Sotomayor, who came out and wrote a big dissent. We'll go through it, but what this resulted in is going to be the firing, the termination of potentially what they're saying, 1,300 people. So the New York Post has some background on this. We'll go through it. And a bunch of other people already got afuera. This video is just amazing. And so if you want to get your popcorn ready, come back in about 15 minutes with your popcorn so we can watch all these State Department losers get fired and thrown out of office or thrown out of their bureaucracy. So we'll talk about it. Look at them. Oh, anyways, we'll come back to that. All in the Supreme Court news. And so we got some winning still happening out of the Justice Department, which is all great. Then we're going to talk about, guess what? Ghislaine Maxwell, because she's at the Supreme Court. You just can't get away from it. And boy, nothing is going to open up the Epstein saga unlike a Supreme Court exoneration of Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, so just get ready for it. She is now fighting to have her convictions thrown out. And I think she's got a very good argument on this, by the way. We've been covering this since we covered her trial way back when and saw that her non-prosecution agreement, or rather Jeffrey Epstein's non-prosecution agreement, covered all of his co-conspirators, named and unnamed. And she was a co-conspirator. So we've long said that it applied to her. Now she's taking it up to the Supreme Court. You see the Ghislaine Maxwell up to SCOTUS, and this is the response in opposition to her. So we'll read through this. D. John Sauer just dropped this one today. Today was the deadline to get this brief submitted and filed, and so now it's here. We'll read through it because the DOJ is saying, man, don't let her out. But the Supreme Court has a real good basis based on the document, on the legal contract. I'm not saying that Ghislaine should be let out. I'm just saying the DOJ gave Epstein such an insane deal that in our read of it, as a defense attorney, I would make the argument all day, 10 out of 10, that it covered her because I think it did. Intent and by in writing. But the courts of appeal said, well, it doesn't really apply to her because she kind of is outside the scope on this. But we'll go through it. We'll see what the DOJ says and we'll see what the Supreme Court does on this. But boy, oh boy, what if SCOTUS comes out and says Ghislaine wins and that her convictions are thrown out? Probably will happen now. Okay, so just get ready for that. Now, we also got some more stuff on the Epstein saga. First of all, Israel has said they've had enough. Okay, we've been accusing them of being connected with Epstein, Mossad, Ghislaine, her father, Robert Maxwell, all these business people, all the financial transactions, all the things. And they're sick of it. They're tired of us and people like Tucker Carlson. They don't want to hear it from us anymore. And so they said there's a vicious wave of slander and lies against his country, which nobody's really been screaming about his country. We've been talking about Mossad and the government, not attacking the country specifically. But he says that they're not going to take it anymore. All right, so we'll see what they're going to do. Hopefully they don't start another sex pedophile ring, but I'll tell you what, we're not going to talk about it. Stop talking about it, that's for sure. So we got some reporting on this. Tucker Carlson had been making waves on this. We've got some other clips here about Robert Maxwell and this book called Robert Maxwell, Israel's Super Spy, which is giant. Look at this. I've not read it, but it's a giant book. I don't know if I can finish that whole book. It's a lot about how he's Israel's super spy. But anyways, there's a lot of evidence there, it looks like. And the big question we've been asking all weekend long, did Dan Bongino show up to work today or not? And is he going to be at the FBI or leave? What's going on? We don't really know. So guess he didn't really show up to work today either. So Bongino's still in limbo. Now, Trump is fuming about it, CNN says. J.D. Vance going to play mediator, and we got a bunch of other stuff on this. So we've got Trump commented on it, said he spoke with Dan. We've got Democrats now seizing on this, but Mark Wayne Mullen coming in and Tulsi Gabbard saying they're working on reform and they're fighting the deep state. So we'll go through all of that. Then we got a quick update on the Biden stuff because the Biden Autopen scandal now gets even worse for them. Their cover-up continues. But Joe, unfortunately, for their cover-up, talked to the press. He sat down for an interview. The New York Times. Who the hell let him do that? And he kind of ran his mouth. And he's like, actually, we did use the Autopen on a lot of those pardons, including maybe even Dr. Fauci's. And of course, Rand Paul is saying, you know, if Fauci's pardon isn't valid, how about we just charge him too? And so he's going to renew his criminal referral for Fauci. And so we got a bunch of good stuff. And so my friends, what a beautiful day it is. Welcome back. I hope your weekend was outstanding. We had a great trip. We went up to the Grand Canyon. And hopefully you got to join us on that Saturday stream where we were showing you on the laptop, the Grand Canyon. But it was a ton of fun. Thanks for joining us over there. We also had a great members only stream where we checked out some of the photos from the trip and got to see and say hello to our other friends who also got robbed on trains before. And it was just a great members only stream this morning. We love our membos. We'd love it if you became a membo. It's a great way to support our work, great way to meet other people in the community and grab some extra content, going through the stories on the day and getting to a bunch of stuff that we can't get to here. Love to have you. Thank you for joining. Watching thewatchers.locals.com or on YouTube, click the join button. And we'll see you on the members only stream tomorrow morning. All right. And so my friends, now let's get into business on the day because we got a lot to get to. And here is some of the goodness. Victory in the Supreme Court yet again. You see, this is the case where they sued the Department of Education and they said, who do you think you are? You think you're running this department? No, we are. I am, in fact. And the judge who's running it was this guy, remember? Myung Jeon, who came in from Seoul, South Korea. Born over there, came in, and Joe Biden appointed him in 2023. And then he just decided, I'm the president now, and so eat it. Trump said, we're going to start firing people. He said, no, you're not. Trump took this up to the Supreme Court, and boom, the Supreme Court came back down in a victory. Showing here, 6 judges versus the 3. Very short decision from the Supreme Court. We'll take a look at Judge Sotomayor's response and her dissent and what she's so upset about, but you'll notice they didn't let Jackson write this one. So Sotomayor is upset about it, and really why they're upset is the same reason they're always upset, is because this is going to result in a firing of a bunch of people, 1,300 give or take, over from the Department of Education is what some reports say. And this now is lifting Myung Jeon's limitation on Trump's order. Remember, Trump came out, signed an order. We're going to make some changes here. He said, no, you can't. Anybody who's fired, you have to come back, bring them back. I'm in charge. So now the Supreme Court came back down and they wrote the following. All right. Trump's DOJ applied for a stay to us, to the Supreme Court, and it was presented to Justice Ketanji, and she gave it to the court. Now, they come back down, not a lot of rationale from them. They say that the May 2025 preliminary injunction issued by Judge Myung from South Korea is now stayed pending the disposition of the appeal, right? So Trump now can fire these people, begin that process while they're appealing. It currently was stayed. Trump couldn't act until the appeals were resolved. Now he can. So that means the Supreme Court is likely going to be inclined to find in their favor, even if the lower level court of appeals finds against Trump, right? They're saying, actually, looking like on balance here, we should be deferring to the executive branch, as has always been the case up until Trump came around and the entire judiciary got weaponized. So they write, should cert be denied, right? In other words, we're going to keep the status quo until this comes back up to us. If the Court of Appeals deals with it appropriately and we're happy, we'll leave it alone. If they don't, we'll deal with it when somebody else appeals based on their ruling. And that's the game. So a big victory for Trump. And of course, that means they can actually do what they were elected to do, which is to run the executive branch, which is a new and novel concept for the Democratic Party, apparently. But what we see also is that Sotomayor is dissenting, and she's saying this is going to be a disaster. Says this case arises out of Trump's unilateral efforts to eliminate a cabinet-level agency established by Congress nearly half a century ago. And they always do that, right? It's funny how it's just kind of like a linguistic mechanism. Half a century ago, 3 decades ago, 100 years ago, abortion's been allowed for 65 years. Remember all that? It's always that. Okay, relax. Half a century? Great. You mean this country existed for 200 years without that? Without the Department of Education? So it's just it's a platitude. It really means nothing. So you can just kind of delete it, as this judge should do. Now, as Congress mandated, the department plays a vital role in the nation's education system. We have some of the dumbest people on the planet, safeguarding equal access to learning and channeling billions of dollars to school and students across the country. It doesn't go to students. That's the problem. It goes to the teachers' unions and to the Democrats and to the trans organizations. Now, only Congress has the power to abolish that department, says Sotomayor. And when the executive publicly announces its intent to break the law, which they didn't, and then executes on that promise, it is the judiciary's duty to check that lawlessness and not to expedite it. She says 2 lower courts, like the judge from South Korea, preliminarily enjoin the mass firings while the litigation remains ongoing, right? And so their backdrop is always, we should defer to the status quo to preserve the government bureaucracy and not let Trump actually govern. Now, that decision is indefensible, they said. Trump is now going to be lifting this injunction, this court, and he's going to be dismantling the entire department. And what that means is Trump has the power to repeal statutes, and he can fire all those necessary to carry this out. And so I am unable to join this use of our emergency docket, and Sotomayor is going to continue to cry. Now, let's fast forward to the damages, because she's going to talk about a lot of the damages. She's going to say, the directive offered competing explanations. We don't really know why these people are being fired. And the reason for that silence has become apparent, because this is going to be a total shutdown. And McMahon has been asked a lot about this. And internal developments leading up to this, when they came in, they were told to start preparing lists of people. And then Trump formalized the order. So she's taking us on a little bit of a history lesson. And here you go. Dozens of affidavits from people saying we're going to die. Even short-term delays in funding can force school districts to make cuts and to staff and programs and disrupting services for students and families and teachers' unions and the Democratic Party. Scores of officials who worked for the department also attested that the agency would no longer be able to carry out many of its duties, and they're all going to die. So Sotomayor is going to say a preliminary injunction is meant to prevent that from happening. And Trump doesn't have authority to close a cabinet-level agency. But what has happened is they're doing that. And that McMahon is exceeding her powers. And so this court shouldn't be doing that. Now, the mass firings and terminations has already resulted in harms, saying the state plaintiff submitted affidavits about some technical college in Washington state, for instance, that did not receive recertification in time. And others admitting students for financial aid, it's going to cost colleges lost funds. Now, that showing is sufficient for this lawsuit to proceed. And so we should defer to the status quo, saying the government is not persuasive. And so Sotomayor is going to respectfully dissent. But meanwhile, we've got a bunch of firings that are about to come down the pike. You saw 1,300 workers looking like they might be shown the door. And that happened recently. In fact, Reuters just explained to us the State Department elsewhere. This is not the State Department. This is the Department of Education. But the State Department in the building next door, they began firing more than 1,350. I was almost going to say 1,300, but I didn't want to forget those extra 50 people. U.S.-based employees gone as the Trump administration proceeded with an unprecedented overhaul of its diplomatic corps. And here's a video of these civil servants losing their jobs. Oh no, get your popcorn and watch them as they have to go through what they tried to impose on all of us. Remember during the lockdowns, and remember during the non-essential. Remember when many of us were deemed non-essential? Of course we were lawyers, so we're like essential, but everyone else is not essential. Remember that crap? And they sat around and they're like, if you don't take the jab, you should go to prison. There was a sizable, maybe plurality of Democrats who thought that. And maybe not prison, but a big, I think even majority of Democrats thought you should be fined or you should be denied medical care, medical treatment. Remember all that? Remember the viciousness from these people? So when I start to say, you don't want to take any joy in someone's suffering, Schadenfreude is not a very nice thing to indulge in too often, even though we do. But these people were monstrous to us in our government, at the State Department, at education, all the bureaucrats. And they got fat and rich off that time off. And the rest of us had to have police come to local businesses and knock on their doors. It was really offensive. So they can go find other private sector jobs. They've been deemed to be non-essential, but I think they're going to have a hard time getting a new job because this is how they look and act. Get out of the road, idiots! It's a crosswalk. Gosh, they got nice shirts together.
Sabotage, pulling people back from the front lines when we really need them the most. Now that we have the tensions in the Middle East, ascendant China, and aggressive Russia, what are we doing pulling back the people who know how to deal with these tensions in the world?
And to those that have been riffed, to those that have been fired today, I just want to say, I'm sorry. And you have deserved better than this.
No.
I think every single person, when you leave this building, you walk through out those doors.
Did he just say feds matter? Is that what that sign says? Feds matter? Feds lives matter. They're going to start taking a knee for that? Oh, my
walk through out those doors for the final time. You should do it with honor and dignity. You should not do it out of humiliation and out of this type of weaponization of politics. You deserve better.
Okay, you see why they were fired. They had to go. Listen to them. We need more testosterone in the State Department. That was clearly not enough. So we're happy to see that there were some changes there. The Supreme Court has cleared the road for future firings in a 6-3 decision. Sotomayor and the Libs very unhappy about it. But just think of it, guys, don't worry about it if you're on the left. Just think of it as non-essential. It's not that big of a deal. It's just temporary. It's 2 weeks for you to go find a new job. You'll be fine. You'll find a new job in 2 weeks. Trump's economy's booming. So go get a real job, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, so that happened. Now, let's go to the Supreme Court because we now have Ghislaine Maxwell knocking on the door at SCOTUS. And this is a curious one. Ghislaine Maxwell, now at the Supreme Court of the United States, has been there for a little bit, but we got some new activity here now that the Trump Department of Justice has responded to this. There was a deadline by which they had to get their brief in opposition in from the United States, and boom, it just dropped today from D. John Sauer, Solicitor General on behalf of President Trump. And this involves Ghislaine Maxwell. And remember, we've covered the Ghislaine Maxwell case for years now, including her trial. And we saw that one of her key arguments in the litigation up to her trial was that she was immune from prosecution. Remember, Jeffrey Epstein got that sweetheart plea deal before any of these new charges and before he was imprisoned again the second time. And as a part of that plea deal, there was an agreement, a contract with the government between Jeffrey Epstein and the U.S. Department of Justice. And in that plea deal, there was language that was extremely expansive. It basically said Epstein cannot be prosecuted for any other crimes connected to this, and any associates, co-conspirators, witnesses, anybody else who would be in the arena of this endeavor would also be immunized. And we thought that that also, of course, applied to Maxwell. Now, she has been appealing this and has been losing it thus far, but now we're at the Supreme Court, and boy, oh boy, nothing is going to blow the lid off the Jeffrey Epstein saga other than a Ghislaine Maxwell exoneration or Supreme Court reversal. And an exoneration of her because the plea deal meant she should have never been prosecuted at all. And if she goes free and there's no additional investigation and no further inquiry into any other co-conspirators or any other indictments coming down the pike, I think there will be a much bigger backlash than we're even seeing now, which is hard to fathom because it's pretty big. And so here is what Glenn has sent in to the Supreme Court. The question, of course, is the following: whether Maxwell's prosecution for trafficking of a minor in violation of U.S. code by the Southern District of New York was prohibited by a non-prosecution agreement between her co-conspirator. This is, of course, Epstein, right? Now, he was prosecuted. He signed a plea deal long time ago, and that deal was very broad. Now, the Court of Appeals denied Maxwell, so did the district court. Now we're at the Supreme Court. And here is what the DOJ says in response to Glenn. They're going to say, our convictions were totally valid and uphold those. Here's what they write. Following a jury trial in the state of New York, Ghislaine was convicted on one count of conspiring to transport minors with intent to engage in criminal activity in violation of code. One count transporting a minor. One count trafficking of a minor. The district court sentenced her to 240 months of prison before that judge got promotion to the Court of Appeals, to be followed by 5 years of supervised release. Now, here's the background. From about 1994, this is Trump's DOJ writing this to the Supreme Court, Glenn coordinated, facilitated, and contributed to the multimillionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of numerous young women and underage girls. The abuse followed a pattern. Maxwell and Epstein would identify vulnerable girls living under difficult circumstances, isolate them from their friends and families, gaining their trust by giving them gifts and pretending to be their friends. They would normalize the discussion of topics involving intercourse and touching and all the things. And then it would slowly transition to abuse, often through a pretext of a massage. Now, Maxwell and Epstein paid them large amounts of cash to provide Epstein with massages, and after a victim had begun giving massages, they would offer her additional money to go and recruit other girls. Now, Maxwell and Epstein carried on those activities at various locations, including Palm Beach, Florida, and New York City. In 2005, the parents of a 14-year-old girl complained to the Palm Beach police after learning that Epstein had paid their daughter for a massage. Now, the following year, a state grand jury indicted Epstein for soliciting prostitution. But because the local police were dissatisfied with the state attorney's handling of the case and believed that the state grand jury's charge did not address the totality of his conduct, because the local cops were like, yeah, this isn't soliciting prostitution, okay? This isn't some lonely dude who hops on Craigslist and responds to some Fed or some, in this case, state cop. He's like, hey, baby, want a good time? And goes over there, boom, that's soliciting prostitution, okay? You get charged with a misdemeanor for that, or, depending on what you're soliciting, I suppose. But it is a pretty minor thing, okay, relative to global sex trafficking by a billionaire millionaire who's hanging with billionaires. They referred to the matter to the FBI, which was their first mistake. They should have just kept it. The movies are right. Feds came in. Oh, gosh, they're going to wreck everything. So the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida, who worked with the FBI to develop a federal case against Epstein, they were on it. Now, in the course of the investigation, they discovered additional victims. You're kidding. An assistant U.S. attorney drafted a 60-count indictment against Epstein and a lengthy memo summarizing the evidence against him. In 2007, however, the Florida U.S. Attorney's Office entered into a written non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. Wow. Now, that means it's like Epstein, okay, so just to piece together what happened, right? Epstein gets popped. Local parents of a daughter who's being abused by Epstein, 14 years old, giving massages, totally inappropriate. So she tells parents, I got paid for this, and they call the state cops. State cops say, oh my gosh, they look into this, like this is not just, this is like way bigger deal than we ever thought. So at that moment, Epstein knows about this case. Okay, so he's not waiting for him to be charged. He's got, millions of dollars and the best defense lawyers you can think about. So as soon as there's a whiff of this, they're on the case. They're talking to, getting information of cops, contacting them, contacting state prosecutors, anyone local they're getting their hands on to bundle this thing up. Then they get the hint that they're going to pass it off to the FBI. They go, great, perfect, even better for us. So we're going to go work with the U.S. attorneys now, and we're just going to go talk to them. before the indictment is presented, okay, before the 60 count, whatever that was going to be, they came out and just entered a plea deal, okay? Don't file this, right? This is a pre-indictment plea deal, a resolution. It's not that common. Most of the time, you see people who are indicted and then enter a plea deal, but this is happening before the plea deal ever happens because you don't want that to hit the docket, right? You don't want that 60 count indictment to be public record because that's a part of the damage as well. So then they knock out this smoking deal, wild, non-prosecution agreement, which is basically like a diversion deal to some certain extent. And let's read it. They come to this agreement. Began by describing the NPA, described the state and federal investigations into Epstein's conduct, right? And they wrapped it all up. They said, these are all the things that we're looking at because this is going to be a global plea deal. We're not just going to deal with like this one girl and this one set of parents and family and then charge you with all these other things. It's going to be global. Will you take it? Now, the agreement noted that Epstein here sought to resolve globally his state and federal criminal liability. And so this is why Glenn is going to say it covers her. Write this. This is in it. In the plea deal, on the authority of R. Alexander Acosta, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, prosecution in this district for the federal offenses shall be deferred, meaning the feds will not prosecute, in favor of prosecution by the state of Florida, provided that Epstein abides by the following conditions and the requirements of this agreement set forth below. Then the plea deal, right? So the feds are like, okay, fine. So the local cops are like, you guys should have this. They're like, actually, we don't want it. Why don't you guys have it? And then you can just enter the plea deal there. Now, the agreement specified that if Epstein timely fulfilled all the terms and the conditions of the agreement, no prosecution against him would be instituted in this district, is what they're saying. And I think that was the split on the other judges. They said, well, that also is included in there. So it's only for the Southern District of Florida. Glenn is prosecuted in New York. The NPA then listed 13 terms, which principally required Epstein to plead guilty to 2 state offenses, which is soliciting prostitution and soliciting minors to engage in prostitution, and serve 16 months of imprisonment under the state charges while the feds kicked it down and didn't do anything. Now, a later provision stated that if Epstein successfully fulfilled all terms and conditions of this agreement, the United States also agrees that it will not institute any criminal charges against any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, including but not limited to 4 of Epstein's assistants, none of whom was Glenn. All right. So that's that key point that Glenn is latching onto. The deal literally says, so there's kind of 2 parts to the deal. One of them says, we're not going to prosecute you again in this one district, but then another part of the deal says, well, if Epstein is successful, no co-conspirators are going to be prosecuted because it's a global resolution. And Glenn is saying this right here, right? I'm a co-conspirator. You guys alleged that against me. And so I'm protected. This deal by the DOJ gave blanket immunity to all of her co-conspirators, including 4 of his assistants who are facilitating this too, who will never face any culpability at all because Glenn's the only one sitting in custody. Now, such a co-conspirators clause was highly unusual, right? We all were, what? Everybody? Even unnamed people? It encompasses everybody anywhere for all time? I thought, wow. And it appears to have been added with little discussion or consideration by the prosecutors, but the defense attorneys were doing cartwheels as soon as they left their offices. During a later investigation into the Florida U.S. Attorney's handling of Epstein, the assistant U.S. attorney who handled the case told the DOJ Office of Professional Responsibility that she, quote, did not consider the possibility that Epstein might be trying to protect anyone other than the 4 named assistants. Wow, genius prosecutor over there. We thought we got everybody. And other USAO attorneys suggested that the co-conspirators clause was meant to protect named co-conspirators who were also victims. And so they're saying, well, we wrote in there this, but we actually meant more like that. Okay, well, why'd you write it that way then? You're lawyers. That's your job. The co-conspirators clause is not the only clause that refers to the United States. Instead, the agreement refers variously to the United States Attorney, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the United States. So now we're asking ourselves in the plea deal, right? What parts are, and who is the subject, or who is the main actor essentially? So the United States as the entire entity of the United States, which would encompass all the districts everywhere? Or is it the United States attorney, which are all prosecutors who are federal prosecutors across the country? Or is it the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is even narrower, which means it's only one office in one district in one state? So what is it? And it basically refers to all of them. For example, the NPA, the agreement, provides for the United States attorney to send notice to Epstein if he should determine based on reliable evidence that Epstein violated the agreement, and specifies the notice should be provided within 60 days of a breach. Now, DOJ policy provided at that time, and similarly provides today, that no district or division shall make any agreement, including any agreement which purports to bind other districts, right? So now this is Pam Bondi's DOJ saying, actually, when we wrote that deal, we have other rules about how we do plea deals at the DOJ. And one of our rules in our manual is that you can't write deals like that. Like you can't bind other districts. This was signed by Epstein, his counsel, and under Acosta's name. And in accordance with the agreement, he pleaded guilty to 2 offenses, Florida State Court. He was incarcerated for about a year in a minimum security state facility where they probably had, massages there for him too. But in 2019, the USAO for the Southern District of New York indicted him in an entirely separate district with trafficking of minors. In 2020, a grand jury returned an indictment, several offenses arising. Also, this is one now charged. So Epstein got charged, then Maxwell got charged. Several offenses for her scheme with Epstein. Now, a second superseding and ultimately operative indictment charged Maxwell with 6 offenses related to facilitating activity by minors and 2 counts of perjury for Ghislaine. Now, she moved to dismiss the indictment. She said, sorry, Epstein's plea deal barred my prosecution. I'm a co-conspirator. You charged me as a co-conspirator. And the plea deal covers me. Now, the district court said no, it was only in Florida, right? It was only bound by Florida. The court further found, which is like, why would Epstein sign that deal? That's ridiculous. He would never sign that. They wanted to mean the nation. If it's a global resolution, why would it only be to one district? I mean, you'd have to be a dumb defense attorney and say, oh, great, everything's fine. And they just go next door and indict you? The court further found that most of the charged offenses would have fallen outside the scope of the agreement, even if it had applied to the New York case as well. So Maxwell was tried on the non-perjury counts in 2021, and the jury found her guilty on 5 counts. The district court entered judgment on 3 of those counts, dismissed 2 on multiplicity, and sentenced her to 240 months of prison. Court of Appeals affirmed that. She said, again, I am barred from prosecution. The court said, no, you're not, the Court of Appeals. The court cited circuit precedent for the proposition that the plea agreement binds only the office in the United States Attorney for the district in which it was entered, unless it affirmatively appears that the agreement contemplates a broader restriction. See, so, whoa, so there's precedent there. So, right, so the Supreme Court, like they probably won't come back on this, but they could, unless it contemplates a broader restriction. They're saying, well, it's everywhere. It's the United States. It's the United States Attorney. And here the court found no thing in the text of the agreement or its negotiation history suggests that they precluded that office from prosecuting Maxwell for the charged offenses. Like, yeah, it's true. The plea deal definitely didn't say you also can't prosecute her in New York, and they did anyways. That didn't happen. But if the broader prosecution definition would certainly fit. Now, the Court of Appeals also observed that the only language in the agreement that speaks to the agreement's scope is the limiting language. So how broad is it? Is it limited to Florida or is it broader? Quoting language protecting Epstein from charges, quote, in this district. The court also found no indication, and that is a very limiting phrase, right? In this district, like the Supreme Court could write that all day. Now, the court also, in other words, you don't have to set new precedent on this. You just have to interpret the plea agreement. The court also found no indication that either the Southern District of New York had reviewed and approved that, as DOJ policy would have required if the NPA applied to the other districts. Okay, so why should the defendant suffer that the DOJ prosecutor didn't follow their manual, didn't follow their policy? Like, setting aside Epstein and Ghislaine, okay? If you're in this plea deal and you enter this deal, not that you'd ever commit a crime, and your prosecutor didn't do their due diligence, and you get the benefit of that deal and you enter that deal, why should that count against you? Because they didn't approve it. They entered the deal. The court accepted the deal. It was presented to you as one set. You accepted it. Now you're screwed because they want to change the terms that you thought you agreed to, and they didn't get it approved by their boss or something. Like, think about that with a car or something. Like, you sign a contract that's for this price, and they come back and they say, actually, no, it's double. You go, what? I didn't check with my boss. Well, that's your problem. I signed this deal. I'm driving the car. I paid the money. The deal's done, right? And now it is, trying to undo that and say, actually, it was only limited to this little circumstance because Epstein is way worse than we thought. So Alex Acosta should be the person who is investigated for that. Why didn't he go and get approval for that? Was he trying to just squeeze this one through? And why? And the court recognized that from the inception of the office of the judiciary, the U.S. Attorney's authority has always been cabined to their district unless otherwise directed. Now, petitioner renews her contention, Maxwell, to the Supreme Court. She says Epstein's non-prosecution agreement with the U.S. attorney barred her prosecution. But Pam Bondi and the new DOJ via D. John Sauer, they say that is incorrect. And Ghislaine does not show that she would win in any appeals. This case would also be unsuitable as a vehicle for addressing the matters raised in a previous petition. This court has previously denied cert in another case raising a similar claim, which is good indication that it won't reverse this one. You should do the same here. Here's why. The Court of Appeals correctly says that Ghislaine's prosecution is not barred. Prosecution for one of her 3 counts was barred, she says, because the agreement said the United States, see, that's where it's different. So it's like, in this jurisdiction, in this district, we will not prosecute Epstein. But in this section, the relevant part is the United States, which is the entire U.S. government, not the United States Attorney's Office for Florida, also agrees that it, the government, will not institute criminal charges against any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, including but not limited to the 4 assistants who also escaped charges. It's pretty dang broad. But non-prosecution agreements like plea bargains are contractual in nature, and therefore they're interpreted like contracts. And other contracts must be read as a whole. And other parts of that, because that language is very bad for them, right? That they're like, oh crap, he did write the United States. That covers all of us. Darn it. Well, actually, you got to read it in totality. Now, while the United States could conceivably refer to the entire federal government, as Maxwell urges, the entirety and the context of this agreement here make clear the term is used, as it often is, as one alternative way to refer to the U.S. attorney who's actually executing the agreement. It's just like, Rob, Robbie, Robert, Bob, Bobby, whatever, It's just interchange. We don't want to keep saying U.S. Attorney's Office, U.S. Attorney's Office, U.S. Attorney's Office. It's just the same thing. We just were referring to us. Now, by executing the agreement, noting that the United States is common shorthand for the USAO, interpreting that the United States in the statute to mean prosecutorial division of the government, it's just referring to like the body, not the specific entity of the United States. Saying the agreement was with the U.S. Attorney's Office, not the entire DOJ. Yeah, but it kind of was with the attorney that was arguably binding the rest of the DOJ. Oh my gosh. While petitioner Maxwell says that the paragraph stating that Epstein sought to resolve globally his state and federal criminal liability, which would mean everywhere. Again, right? Epstein's not going to sign this if he can go get... He had multiple residences in multiple locations. He knew what was going on. He wanted national immunity, and he got it. He was in Florida, New York, New Mexico. Even as to his federal liability specifically, the agreement by its terms protected him from federal prosecution, quote, only in this district. So they put that in there. And the Court of Appeals is saying, where the NPA is not silent, the agreement's scope is expressly limited to Florida. Now, the NPA's co-conspirators clause, which also agrees to forego certain prosecution of others like Gullin, cannot reasonably be construed as reflecting some global scope broader than Florida and the federal charges that Epstein resolved for himself. It would be extremely strange if the NPA left Epstein himself open to federal prosecution in another district, as eventually occurred, while protecting his co-conspirators from prosecution anywhere. So that's another good point, right? Like, they charged Epstein again for similar conduct, and they say he wasn't even protected by that plea deal because it's, new conduct and new charges. But he would, I think, also have made this argument, and he didn't because he was dead like within a month. But it was a very interesting question that has been left unresolved, right? Why did they prosecute him? And could he have made the same argument? Say, I've already, like, you're making the same allegations that you made in the first one. You had a 60 count indictment and you're going to just regurgitate that. I already signed that away. You can't prosecute me. But what they're saying is, since they did prosecute him, and obviously that was allowed at, the threshold level, so too is it allowed for Gullin. Now, they continue. Pam Bondi, D. John Sauer, and the DOJ writing in response and opposition to Ghislaine Maxwell's attempt to have her charges thrown out at the U.S. Supreme Court, filed just today, says, contrary to Maxwell's claims, such an implausible reading cannot be inferred simply because the co-conspirators clause is one of the places where they use the United States. And as noted above, they variously refer to it as a bunch of different things. U.S. Attorney's Office, the United States, and USAO. So it's just, it's like whatever. It's like bro, buddy, bud, man, dude. It's all the same. Different words used in different parts of the same statute, but they mean roughly the same thing, okay? So the term did not take on some new broader meaning that applies all over the states. Moreover, even if the meaning of the clause were not clear in context, we could also use extrinsic evidence that would resolve the ambiguity against Gullin. At the time this was negotiated, DOJ policy barred the attorneys from entering into NPAs that bound other districts unless they obtained the approval of those districts or the criminal division. So again, that's their problem. Like, their attorney entered into a contract on behalf of someone else. So you can have a problem with him, but why would that invalidate the intent of the original agreement if he was acting with the authority of a U.S. attorney? That policy reflects the longstanding general rule that an area of responsibility is limited to his district. While petitioners suggest that they're instructed to be explicit on that point, they're also instructed to consult with other components if they're going to foreclose any other prosecution. And there's no indication here that anyone involved in negotiating this obtained the necessary approval for binding others or thought it was even necessary. So I guess it's kind of like they didn't do the thing. There's no evidence that they did the thing, so therefore they didn't. Petitioners' contrary arguments also lack merit. Gullin says she invokes general principles that prosecutors should be held to the promises they make, right? Kind of a platitude there. And that ambiguities in the plea agreement are to be resolved against the government. And I believe that to be true. Like, if the government screws up and you get the benefit of that, and the government wants to come back and be like, sorry, we screwed up, that shouldn't be against the citizen. But those arguments merely beg the questions of what promises the NPA did make and whether the NPA is ambiguous. As explained above, the co-conspirators clause, read in context, doesn't comply with Maxwell's interpretation. And the relevant portions of the agreement with Epstein do not have any sort of parallelism in their wording or structure that would suggest the necessity for identical terminology. Like, we don't need to say the United States Attorney's Office over and over and over again, because it's referring to the same thing if you put them in the sequence. And so their remaining arguments from Gullin are also likewise misplaced. Her effort to link the co-conspirators clause with other NPA provisions is self-defeating since it's limited to Florida. At all the events, the case-specific interpretation of this is not a matter that warrants this court's review, okay? So you don't need to even hear the Supreme Court. It's settled. And the other circuits have already found that she's going to lose this argument. But anyways, it's of limited importance to hear this type of matter. Because even if you assume the United States were presumptively a reference to the entire federal government, the scope of the co-conspirators clause would nonetheless be clear, saying this case would be unsuitable for further review. And even if they wanted to bind everyone else in Florida, they would have lacked the authority to do so. And so, therefore, from Trump's DOJ, D. John Sauer, up to the Supreme Court of the United States, you should review Maxwell's case and make sure it is denied. And we'll see what the Supreme Court does on that. But this just came out fresh out of the oven, and there's been a bunch of activity on this case in recent days. But it was filed originally back in January 15th, Ghislaine Maxwell taking it up to the Supreme Court. And she's got an argument. I think that the intent of the prosecutor was at that time, and probably understood by Epstein's defense team, to protect everybody. And it did for a decade before Epstein ultimately got indicted again. So we'll see what the Supreme Court does on this, but as it stands, Ghislaine is fighting to have her convictions reversed and thrown out. And if that happens, this Epstein saga is going to shift into high gear. All right, so now with that being said, let's carry on and talk more about Epstein. The Israelis are sick of talking about Epstein, and they're not going to take it anymore. You see, this fella, Naftali Bennett, posted this on X today, and he called out Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson responded to this saying, if you want to talk garbage against me, why don't you come on my show and do it, punk? And here is how this went down. So over the weekend, we saw Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, a bunch of people talking about Epstein. And the conversation has been going on for a long time and asking ourselves, is there a there? Or is there no there? Because depending on what you think, that is, I think, the crux of the matter. If there is a there, who made the decision to not reveal those things? Was it Pam Bondi or Kash Patel or Dan Bongino, or was it President Trump? And if there isn't a there, then why did Pam Bondi and Dan and Kash, at least recently, why did Pam say that there was a there? And why is she still around if that's the case? So where is this going? Of course, we've got questions about it. And if there is a cover-up, the next question was always, why? On what basis? What is at stake? Who is putting their finger on the scale to keep this thing under wraps? And where does the smoke lead to the burning flames? And so what we see now is the Israeli prime minister said he's had enough. In fact, they're not going to take it anymore, okay? They're just not going to take it anymore. He posted this today. He says, as a former Israeli prime minister, with the Mossad having reported directly to me, I say to you with 100% certainty, the accusation that Jeffrey Epstein somehow worked for Israel or the Mossad running a blackmail ring is categorically and totally false. Epstein's conduct, both the criminal and the merely despicable, had nothing whatsoever to do with the Mossad or the state of Israel. Epstein never worked for the Mossad. This accusation is a lie being peddled by prominent online personalities. He's not talking about us. But we are asking these questions, of course, but we don't fit that category. Such as Tucker Carlson pretending they know things that they don't. Oh man, throwing shade on Tucker. We don't take kindly to that. Says they just make things up, say it with confidence, and these lies stick because it's Israel. Oh man. Again, we don't care what country it is. If it is any foreign country interfering in our affairs and we're a part of a cover-up on behalf or to benefit that cover-up, and to benefit that country, I don't care who it is, whether it's China, Ukraine, or Israel. There's a vicious wave of slander and lies against my country and my people, and we just won't take it anymore. Okay. So what are they going to do if we keep talking about it? And stuff like this makes you want to talk about it much more. because they say they're not going to take it. That's fine. They're free to defend themselves. But what are they going to do? Are they going to start another pedophile ring and try to compromise a bunch of Americans? I don't know. But when they say that we're not allowed to talk about it and make a threat, essentially, that we're not going to take it anymore, we start to get a little bit ornery on this. Tucker Carlson responded the same. He says, you just won't take it anymore? Instead of issuing threats on social media, why don't you sit down for a rational interview on Epstein's ties to the Israeli government? We'll reach out to your office this morning. So hopefully they do sit down and talk about it and settle it down. But yeah, a lot of people are pointing to this out. Scott Adams even called it, said, yeah, never worked for? What are you talking about? Like worked for? Maybe Ghislaine Maxwell did. Maybe did she work for Mossad? Do you want to ask her? Because her father certainly did. We heard some of the clip of Tucker talking about this. We played this on Saturday. If you missed it, I'm sure you've heard it. So we'll let you just listen to this on your own time. But this is what Tucker said. He said that, yep, it's pretty clear. Epstein was working on behalf of Israel, and Israel was committing crimes on American soil. And Tucker talked about that and is asking questions about it, as is his right to do that. We're allowed to talk about it because this is America. And we have Glenn Greenwald also shared a bunch of evidence of these connections in multiple posts. He said, hey, just some of the evidence here. They keep saying there's no evidence. Okay. Again, when Pam Bondi was asked last week if Epstein had any ties to intelligence, she said she had no idea and would get back to us. Says, why can't they say this? We investigated and he had no ties to the Israeli government. Why can't they say that? Well, because they probably can't. Here was a report, a news story over from May 4th, 2023. Ehud Barak met with Jeffrey Epstein dozens of times, flew on a private plane. Former prime minister visited disgraced financier and child abuser about 30 times between 13 and 17, including a 2014 private flight in Florida. All right. Here's another one. Epstein bankrolled Barak's high-tech investment. In 2008, he pleaded guilty to soliciting somebody under the age of 18, but still did a bunch of deals with that guy. Israel also, remember this, when Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, died? They sent him off like a national hero. Wild. The country in which he developed an intimate and controversial relationship. Maxwell and his body was discovered off his yacht. Okay, the dude fell overboard and died and then just showed up on the shores. Was given like a state funeral, like probably more than what they even did for Brian Sicknick, the Capitol Hill police officer who died of natural causes. But you recall that there is a lot of evidence about Robert Maxwell. And so maybe Jeffrey Epstein was an asset, but Ghislaine Maxwell was the Mossad connection or something like that. But you're not allowed to talk about those recently, I guess, or else you're going to have the former prime ministers say, we've had enough of you. We're so sick of you. Stop! And start screaming at you. But here was Robert Maxwell. This was a book written by Gordon Thomas. I've not read it yet, but I was just scrolling around. And I saw this. I thought, dang, this book is giant, man. Look at all this. And the title of the book is called Robert Maxwell, which is Ghislaine's father, Israel's super spy, the life and murder of a media mogul, because the dude may have been murdered on his yacht, maybe by the Mossad. I don't know. Mossad probably could have done it. But here's the more background on this dude. Robert Maxwell, of Jewish descent, escaped Nazi occupation of his native country, joined the Czech army World War II, flamboyant lifestyle, litigious, lots of controversy, and his death triggered the collapse of his publishing empire. And he was born into an Orthodox Jewish family after the fall, January 1945. He fought heroically in World War II. After the war, used contacts in the Allied occupation authorities to go into business, publish scientific books and other things. Now, the guy's story is massive and long, but of course, he was very connected with the Israelis, right? A hint of his service to Israel was provided by these two guys who described his contact as crucial in the decision to arm Israel. He's alleged to have distributed bugged versions of software, and many people suspected him of being a secret foreign agent. It's all on Wikipedia, the whole thing. And apparently he died, fell overboard, had an argumentative phone call with his son over a meeting scheduled with the Bank of England on his default in $50 million in loans. He missed the meeting, went on his yacht, the yacht's called Lady Ghislaine, to the Canary Islands in Spain. And then he was last in contact at 4:25 local time, found missing later on in the morning. He was presumed to have fallen overboard from the vessel. which was cruising off the Canary Islands. It's like a Jason Bourne opening scene. Southwest of Spain, Maxwell's naked body was recovered from the Atlantic Ocean and taken to Las Palmas. Besides a graze to his left shoulder, there were no noticeable wounds on Maxwell's body. And dead. The official ruling at an inquest was death by heart attack and accidental drowning. Also, murder was ruled out by the judge, and so was suicide. His son discounted suicide, and Maxwell was afforded a lavish funeral in Israel, attended by Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, Chaim Herzog, and at least 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence, all there. And that was the father of Golan. Many dignitaries and other politicians. British Prime Minister, love the dude, right? And so, okay, is the daughter responsible for the connections of the father? Maybe. In July, Maxwell's youngest child, daughter, Golan, was arrested and charged with 6 crimes, including minors, for being involved in trafficking connected to Epstein. And Epstein also charged before he was removed. So for all the people constantly saying, what are you talking? Where are the connections there? There's a lot of it. Certainly feels like direct connections to Epstein, direct connections to Maxwell. And anytime you start talking about it, there's this giant wave of response saying, shut up. We're not going to take it anymore. We're going to fight back against this conversation that we're having about crimes that occurred in the United States. We're not allowed to talk about that anymore. Okay, we'll see about that. Now, more on that. Next question. Where is Dan Bongino? Dan, still MIA, apparently. In limbo, according to CNN, as Trump fumes and J.D. Vance seeks to play the mediator. Asking where's Dan Bongino? Several of Trump's top officials went to work on Monday with the key question that we all woke up with. Is Dan going to come in today? Hours later, 2 sources familiar with the matter confirmed he did. But his long-term future appeared to be uncertain. So Dan did show up. Now, Dan did not go into office on Friday, largely excommunicated himself from most of his colleagues after a major fallout with Bondi. As of Monday morning, no one in leadership at the DOJ had spoken to Bongino since Wednesday, when he implied he could no longer continue as long as Bondi was there. The threat infuriated Trump, who spent the weekend fuming over both Bongino and FBI Director Cash, sources tell CNN. Most of his fury was directed at Bongino, causing aides to expect that the deputy director would depart his job in the coming days. But Vice President Vance spent the weekend attempting to mediate, at times fielding calls from Patel, Bongino, and Bondi. Now, it remains to be seen if Bongino ultimately resigns, which he has told others he was considering. But sources say his relationship with the White House has become basically untenable. Yeah, I mean, once you can't, it's like a George Costanza scene. Like, you can't unquit. It's like, if you're going to storm out, you better know what you're doing. Even if he does not quit now, some insiders believe he's not going to stay in the job long term. Yeah, it's hard to come back from that. It's like, you made your play. Trump sided with Bondi. That's the game. So your protest didn't work. And I think that might actually be in Bongino's best interest long term anyways. So kind of maybe a win for him. But Trump asked Sunday whether Bongino was still the deputy director. He told reporters, I think so, and indicated they had spoken. He says, I think so. I spoke to him today. Said Bongino's a very good guy. I've known him a long time. I've done a show many, many times, and he sounded terrific, actually. No, I think he's in good shape, said Trump. And here, I believe, was that clip.
Oh, I think so. I did. I spoke to him today. Dan Bongino, very good guy. I've known him a long time. I've done his show many, many times. And he sounded terrific, actually. No, I think he's in good shape. On this one-year anniversary of Butler, what was going on?
All right, so Bongino may be in good shape, but if you're going to have a blowout like that, it's kind of hard to come back, and unless you get what you want, right? If Bongino's very upset about Bondi and nothing's going to change, and he made the threat to resign unless something changes, then how can you go back to that, right? Because then you kind of are violating your own word, aren't you? But again, we might be misreporting on what was actually said and what the extent of the blowup was. But CNN says he did go back today. In a statement on Monday, spokesman Harrison Fields of the White House made mention of Bondi, Patel, and Bongino, as part of Trump's incredible team of law and order patriots who are committed to making America safe and restoring the integrity of our criminal justice system. Now, Bondi, Dan, and Cash, and countless others are dedicated to continuing Trump's agenda, and the conflict has put Trump at odds with his base. Yeah. Bongino denied leaking anything to News Nation, and one Justice Department official told CNN, Bondi is in a great headspace. Her relationship with Trump is as strong as ever, and she looks forward to going on offense. And she's had some good wins. Now, despite the bad blood and accusations of leaks, Bondi isn't seeking to fire Bongino and is ultimately leaving the decision to him, a person familiar with the matter said. So we'll see what happens with Dan. So he was there today, hopefully smoothing things over, we'll say. And CNN said he was back to work. Here's what they reported.
That all at a conservative conference that played out just this Friday. Now, we do have just into CNN. Sources say that Dan Bongino is back at work today.
All right, that's enough of that woman. Golly. All right, so she's having a rough time over there trying to be a broadcaster. But Trump raised a lot of eyebrows with this post over the weekend. And so let's go through it. He posted this in response to a lot of the back and forth regarding Epstein, Bondi, Cash, and Dan. She says, what's going on with my boys? And in some cases, gals. They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world. And selfish people are trying to hurt it, all over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. And a lot of people are reading into that. You mean is he still alive down in an island somewhere? For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with Russia, 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 51 intelligence agents, and the laptop from hell and more? They created the Epstein files, just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me, and now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? They haven't even given up on the JFK or MLK files, nor have we. No matter how much success we have had securing the borders, deporting criminals, and that line, it's like they haven't even given up on those. Like Trump thinks that maybe it's done, like their files are done and released. No matter how much success we had securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, safer world, Iran, no nukes, it's never enough for some people. We are about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years. And we have done so much more. We are saving our country and making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. The left is imploding. Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals, instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen, and they tried to do the same thing in 24. That's what she is looking into as AG and much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, obviously, a lot of people care about it. And the more you say nobody cares about it, the more people are going to start to care about it. And the more you start to accuse other people of being responsible for those files, the more it starts to feel like there might be something problematic in those files, because we know how fake the allegations were in the others, right? That Trump was basically bought off by Russia and colluding with Putin. Pretty heinous allegations. And we know those were fake. But we know that they existed, and we want repercussions, and we want justice for those people too. But I think the big takeaway on this entire post is that the decision ended with Trump. Okay, a lot of people are coming after Pam Bondi and saying, how dared she roll this out and reverse course and all this stuff. And I tend to think that Pam Bondi and Cash and Dan, and especially Dan's reported blowout, support the idea that there is a there. And if that leads to consequences, like you have to say that Trump is a part of a cover-up, or Trump has made the administrative decision that we're not going to focus our energy on this because we're going to focus elsewhere, I think that is a necessary part of the equation. But I don't think that there is no there. And I think you can just add it up, right? Trump is not saying that there isn't a there. He's just saying that we're just going to move on with it, essentially. But in addition to that, you have Dan Bongino actually, throwing a fit, reporting that he is leaving and maybe resigning over it. So that means that's probably about something that went down. It's not just because he didn't like the mechanism of the report, or I didn't get a chance to sign it or something, or we should have done a press conference, right? It's not something minor and procedural. I think it's much broader than that. And what we hear from Pam Bondi is, I would analogize it to a present sense impression. We talk a lot about, in trials, hearsay, right? Objections and hearsay and what can come in and out. There is an exception to hearsay that says if it's a present sense impression, it has more reliability, right? So if you're just coming out and saying things, there might be more truth to that than your engineered statement that comes down later, right? If somebody just says, oh my gosh, he's got a gun, or he's shooting, or somebody comes in and shoots you and you say, oh no, Rob, no. You say, well, that was an out of court statement that identified the shooter. Yeah, but it was like a present sense impression. She was dying. It was an urgency. So she said, Rob was shooting me, right? And I use that in the testimony at trial and convict that guy named Rob. I would never do such a thing. But that's a present sense impression. Now, if that person, right, if somebody comes back out, and so you might let that come in. But if you have an hour goes by, and then somebody writes something down and says, actually, the person who hit me was this person listening, that is less reliable because the person had time to think through a lie. And so what we heard from Pam Bondi when she came in felt to me like it was the truth. Maybe Pam Bondi had multiple phases. Maybe phase one was just the beginning. She had 2, 3, 4, 5 ready to roll out. Maybe she did have everything on her desk as she said. And all of the prior statements of Dan and Cash were all valid until Trump came out and said, listen, we're done with the Epstein stuff. Okay, reverse course. And I think this statement is that exactly. He's basically providing cover for Pam. She's doing a fantastic job. How can Trump fire Pam or demand her resignation when she's doing what he told her to do? So she comes out, she's running this direction. Trump says, nope, we're not going that direction anymore. You're going that way. Pam Bondi says, yes, sir, Mr. President. Drops it, runs the other way. And why that decision happened, you could call it an administrative decision. He wants to preserve a relationship with Mossad or the Israelis, or thinks it's too provocative for some other global leaders, or whatever the justification is, I don't know. But the decision is going to Trump, right? So it's hard to come down on Cash or Dan or Pam. They may have botched the rollout or the mechanism, but if Trump told them to reverse course, they're just following orders of the president. And so that then begs the question, why is the president making that decision? And you can say that that decision is being made in good faith or bad faith, like he's covering up a global pedophile ring, or he's interested in working on bigger issues that are better for the country, that don't have as much collateral damage, and it's just a matter of priority, right? And give him the benefit of the doubt on that. So it is looking like everybody's falling in line, and they're just going to essentially post through this, right? This is kind of what they tell people. Like, if you screw up, you just kind of drive through it, right? Just keep doing live streams. Like when I have a terrible live stream, it's okay, just come back tomorrow. Everybody will forget about it, hopefully soon. And you just keep moving forward. Just keep posting. And so Trump, and I think in the administration, are just going to keep doing that. They're going to keep chalking up these wins. We saw one today out of the Supreme Court where Trump is getting some of his agenda back. And maybe they've just decided they're not going to invest time on this issue, which is, of course, disappointing. But how disappointing is it? Is it enough to disappoint you off of the Trump train? For some people, it is. But we have to, I think, keep this in perspective. There's still a lot of positive winning going on. And until we get more clarity, we're not going to know what was going on in Trump's mind. Maybe stuff will continue to leak. I still think there is a real big risk for the administration on this. If Ghislaine Maxwell wants to start talking, as she's intimating she does, then they could really exploit this. In fact, Epstein is now saying, according to the Daily Mail, Maxwell is now ready to reveal the truth, is what the Daily Mail is reporting. They say she's willing to speak to Congress about this. Some sources told the Daily Mail. She's serving 20 years, despite the fact that Epstein was involved. Epstein's victims were alleged to be passed around. Now a source said, despite the rumors, Ghislaine was never offered any kind of plea deal. She would be more than happy to sit before Congress and tell her story. Wild. No one from the government has ever asked her to share what she knows. She remains the only person to be jailed in connection to Epstein, and she would welcome the chance to tell the American public the truth. Maybe Tucker Carlson can go interview her. What the truth is remains to be seen. Maxwell was convicted in 2022 over her role, and there are those two little lovebirds. Epstein's on the phone. Hi, is this Mossad? Hey, guys. Yeah, I'm working on it. Perfect. All right, great. Says, hey, here's Ghislaine. And I think she's doing like poetry or arts and crafts in prison, I think we read. Maxwell should also be protected from prosecution. She's fighting, took her case up to the Supreme Court. But if something pops on this, right, like in other words, Trump has made the executive decision, we're going to move on from this. And then something pops off. A whistleblower comes out, says, actually, it's way worse than you thought. Alan Dershowitz comes out. Ghislaine Maxwell comes out. Still a lot of loose ends out there that could prove to be a real big problem if there is more of a there. And certainly it seems like there is. Now, the Democrats are jumping all over this. So Jeffrey Epstein became their new cause of the day. If you're trying to hide something like Trump is, then we should investigate him. Here's Timu Obama explaining what he thinks about the Epstein files.
The American people deserve to know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as it relates to this whole sordid.
Can you not talk like that for like one clip on this show?
Jeffrey Epstein matter. Democrats didn't put the Jeffrey Epstein thing into the public domain. This was a conspiracy that Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, and these MAGA extremists have been fanning the flames of for the last several years.
It is true. We've been demanding answers for years. It is true.
And now the chickens are coming home to roost.
Yeah, that's true.
The American people deserve to know the truth. What, if anything, is the Trump administration and the Department of Justice hiding?
Okay, so I was wondering where the Democrats were on this. Like, why did it take them so long to come out on this? And now we got Hakeem Jeffries, who's now decided this is going to be their play, I guess, and try to cause a wedge in the MAGA base, which exists for sure. Like there is already a wedge, not that the Democrats created, but they're just going to, I guess, rally on it. Now, I don't know that this is going to help their cause. Like, do they think that they're going to win some MAGA votes or something? Anyways, Mark Wayne Mullen came out, another senator, and he says, listen, you guys screeching from the rooftops about this. Alexandria Ocasio is posting about it. And Mark Wayne Mullen said, why didn't you guys release the Epstein files over the last 4 years if you're so interested in them? Maybe you were too busy covering for Joe, or could it have something to do with another former Democrat president called Bill Clinton, who was getting those very same massages at the airport on the way to Epstein Island? We all saw what Bill did. Now, Tulsi Gabbard was out over the weekend, and she's saying, look, all this Epstein back and forth, there's a lot going on, but we're working hard in the intelligence agencies, and you can trust us, probably.
The road ahead will not be easy. I can attest personally that in my work as the Director of National Intelligence, the deep state is fighting us every step of the way. And it exists within every single federal agency. And so I feel the same frustration that I see many of you expressing on X or in different platforms about why aren't things going faster? Why aren't we getting results more quickly? I feel this frustration every single day. We are pushing hard. Know that they are pushing hard back. It's okay. We're not going anywhere. We're here to fight for you and to fight for the red, white, and blue that's behind you. We can't do this alone. It will take all of us who love our country and who deeply cherish our freedoms to stand united in this fight. It's going to come with hardship and sacrifice. As you know, it comes with name-calling and smears and lies and attacks. But here's the beautiful thing, is the harder they push back, the more smears and lies that are published in the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Atlantic and many others, the more we know that we are exactly on the target.
All right, so some good optimism there, but it's kind of hard to take what they're saying with a sense of integrity when we just thought that the deep state was going to be involving the feeding of the deep state would involve some transparency on one of the biggest operations conducted by the deep state, arguably in history. So Epstein saga continues. Trump says move on. The Israelis warn Tucker, stop talking about it or we're going to not take it anymore. Whatever that means. So we'll keep our eye on this. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do. All right, one more update, my friends. And then we'll hear from you, see what you say about all this. But here's the latest. The Biden Autopen scandal continues to explode, getting worse by the day, especially when Joe Biden talks. He gave an interview to the New York Times. Nobody really knows why, but the Oversight Committee in Congress is now saying, uh-oh. Now they're confirming Biden used the Autopen to issue executive actions without a clear sign he even approved them. So there's no chain of custody. Biden didn't document authority or approval. They just did it. This is exactly why we're investigating. We must know who is calling the shots in the West Wing. The fifth will not help them cover up the biggest scandal in history from the Oversight Committee. And here's the story they're referencing from the New York Times, capturing a lot of attention out there. They said, Biden sat down for an interview, gave everyone an aneurysm over there. He's going to talk. In an interview with the New York Times, Biden said that he had orally granted all the pardons and commutations issued at the end of his term, orally, calling Trump and other Republicans liars for claiming his aides had used an Autopen to do so without his authorization. Biden says, I made every decision, he said on a phone interview, asserting that he had his staff use an Autopen replicating his signature on clemency warrants because we're talking about a whole lot of people. Which is why you just copy and pasted a bunch of them. The interview was Biden's first about the parallel investigations into his mental acuity. Republicans have demanded sworn interviews. Some lawyers are saying they've warned their clients not to talk publicly about any of this. Biden's former White House doctor invoked the Fifth Amendment multiple times, didn't want to say a thing. The full picture of what Biden did on a pardon and clemency decisions and how much he directed those decisions may come down to tens of thousands of Biden White House emails that the National Archives has turned over as part of those investigations. Those emails contain the keywords like clemency, pardon, commutation. So who approved them? The Times have reviewed several dozen of those emails, which discussed each of the major grants of clemency that were recorded by an Autopen near the end of his term. But the Times has not seen the full extent of the emails, so it's impossible to capture the totality of information about Joe's involvement in the pardon and the decisions. But those that were reviewed by the Times show that the Biden White House had a process to establish that Biden had orally made decisions in meetings before the staff secretary, Stephanie, who managed the use of the Autopen, Stephanie Feldman, president-in-chief, would have clemency records put through the signing device. So it's like when Jill's feeding him his ice cream like an airplane. Open up, Mr. President. Okay, do you want to pardon Hunter Biden? Yes, I do. And just one after another all night long. Oh, here comes another one, Jill. One after another. And he's just pardoning people all night long while he's eating his mint ice cream. Ask what evidence the Trump White House has that Biden did not authorize the clemency actions. A spokesman, Harrison, said on Sunday that Biden should not be trusted, and the truth is going to come out. Now, while Biden had previously criticized the GOP claims that he did not make the clemency decisions, he says those were ridiculous and false. They said that they're stepping up an effort to counterattack Trump. So there really is no signed anything or no real mark. He just said yes, and somebody marked down the verbal record. Trump asked by a reporter whether they'd uncovered anything, that anything was illegally signed. He said no, but he cited his rival's debate performance and says, I've uncovered the human mind, and Joe's was gone. Here was Biden's Autopen signature. And it was also very interesting that the signatures are different. And one of the ones that Joe signed affirmatively by hand was Hunty Poo's. Wanted to make sure nothing got wrong on that one. Now, age-related cognitive decline is a spectrum. Joe is at the far end of it. Biden said in an interview on Thursday that he had his staff use an Autopen for the warrants because he had granted clemency to so many people. The Autopen was used in all on 25 pardon and clemency warrants from last December to January. Some of the warrants included large batches of names because they all fell into the same broad policy category, like reducing the sentences of nonviolent drug offenders who met standards that Biden established. Trump and his congressional allies are focused in particular on trying to delegitimize Biden's final pardons that were scams. Preemptive pardons. Remember Mark Milley? What did he get a pardon for? For orchestrating January 6th. We would argue. Dr. Anthony Fauci and members of the House committee that all investigated the Capitol riot. Why do they need to be pardoned? Why did Adam Pencilneck Schiff get pardoned? In the 10-minute interview, which the Times requested as part of its reporting, Biden said he shielded those people along with members of his family so they would not have to run up large legal bills. Okay, everybody knows how vindictive he is. And so I consciously made all those decisions, Joe Biden said, reading from his cue card. On October 30th, the email reviewed by the Times show, Biden's White House counsel, Ed Siskel, notified senior staff to expect a flood of lobbying. But he said he wrote down in the file, the president makes the final decision. And I know what the president's decisions are. And he made these decisions. He made 4 sets of different categories. He turned death sentences of 37 to 40 out, decided against commuting other people, but emails reflect a bunch of activity around it. They also show that use of the Autopen was managed by the White House staff secretary, Miss Feldman. She wanted to receive written accounts confirming Biden's oral instructions in the meetings before having it used to produce the warrants recording the clemency action, the email shows. The aides refer to those written accounts of the meetings at which Biden delivered oral decisions as blurbs. The accounts were drafted by aides to the senior advisors who had participated in the meetings, like the chief of staff and Siskel. The assistants who drafted the blurbs were not themselves in the room, according to the list of meeting participants. The emails imply that Mr. Siskel and Mr. Zients relayed what Mr. Biden had said to the assistants, who then documented it. Oh, man. So Biden it's like the game of telephone, right? It's Comey buys seashells by the seashore is what one person says at the one end of the telephone. And then by the other end, it's Hunter Biden is a crackhead. And you go, come on, that's not what you said when you started it. So Siskel and Zients, just take it back to them and then they memorialize it. What a rigged system. The assistants circulated the drafts to Siskel and Zients and other meeting participants before sending the final versions to Feldman. Again, copying the meeting participants. So from the earlier set of large-scale clemency actions, the process sometimes took several days after the meeting. And for 2 crucial meetings at the end, it took place on the same day. Like you're expired tomorrow. The emails also show that when the White House was preparing to announce these, communication staffs drafted statements explaining the decisions. He had to be shown the draft, and they could not be released until an aide said that he had approved them. On at least one occasion, wording was tweaked because of what an email said was feedback from Biden. Biden did not individually approve each name for the categorical pardons that applied to large numbers of people, his aides confirmed. Okay, so he just says, okay, you're all in this category. You're all gone. Rather, after extensive discussion, he signed off on standards he wanted to use to determine which convicts would qualify for a reduction. Even after Biden made that decision, one former aide said that the Bureau of Prisons kept providing additional information about inmates, resulting in changes to the lists because he was just, pardoning a bunch of people or commuting. Now, he used General Milley as an example. He says, we know how vindictive Trump is. And I've no doubt they would have gone after Mark Milley for no good reason. The general, So they may read off his name. What I told them I wanted to make sure he had a pardon because I know exactly what Trump would do, without any merit, I might add. You're right. Biden completed the list of high-profile clemency, and one email included Zients, Siskel, and another aide called Bruce Reed. Another on the evening was also Bernal, Jill Biden's work husband. The emails show that Mr. Biden added the preemptive pardons for his family at the January 19th meeting. They also suggested he changed some of his thinking all of a sudden because Hunter came in. The summary for the first meeting said Biden had decided to grant a pardon to Don Siegelman of Alabama. Obama was heavily lobbied to pardon him. Never happened. And Biden said, I agree, and I just pardoned him. The emails show that an aide to Siskel sent a draft of Biden's decisions So Siskel tells the aide, then the aide makes the decisions and copies other people, and they all get the notes. 3 minutes later, Zients hit reply all, say, I approve the use of the Autopen. Mr. Zients wrote this. 3 minutes later, I approve the use of the Autopen for the execution of all the following pardons. That night, this was the night of the Biden family pardons, took place in the yellow Oval Room of the White House. Biden kept his aides until 10 p.m. at night to talk through these decisions about Hunty-Poo. Emails show that an aide sent it at 10:03 p.m. and he responded, reply all 10:28. Pardons approved. I'm Mr. Jeff Zients. I'm the president. Ed Martin is now saying, we're looking into this. The scrutiny of this Autopen intensified last month. Trump signed an order saying, got to go figure out what happened to Joe's brain and who exploited it. 2 days earlier, Martin told other people he was conducting an investigation. James Comer is launching an investigation. And Trump and the White House are cooperating. Many firms are performing work at no costs. Many of Biden's aides and allies dismissed the investigations. The firms, some of which are performing work at no cost, are Latham and Watkins, Covington and Burling, Cooley and Steptoe. Many of the same rotten firms we've talked about here before. Michael Bromwich, senior counsel, criticized the inquiry. He says the fact that this Biden so-called investigation is the obsessive focus of the Republicans, and Comer's committee has requested interviews with a bunch of people. Klain, Donnellan, Dunn, Reed, Zients, Tomasini, subpoenaed other aides. Dr. O'Connor, Bernal. O'Connor refused to answer any questions. Bernal didn't appear. Now he's going to get a subpoena. Neera Tanden testified, and Biden has hired a new lawyer. Her name is Amy Jeffress. He had been without one since he and his former personal lawyer, Bob Bauer, parted ways. Miss Jeffress, and Miss Bauer declined to comment. Yeah, Biden's prior lawyer has had a falling out, and Biden granted Hunter a pardon, and the whole thing was pretty sick. Now, this fella, Hans Monkey, you know him, great follow on X, does great reporting, and says, it speaks volumes that the only pardon Biden signed personally during that last meeting was Hunter's. They knew the Autopen was legally shaky, so Hunter made sure that one that mattered most actually counted. And with all this good news and questions about whether these pardons are valid at all, we now have Rand Paul saying, you know what? Let's go after Fauci. Today, I will reissue my criminal referral of Anthony Fauci to Trump's DOJ. And so we'll see if if Rand Paul modifies it at all, or whether the DOJ does anything. Hopefully Pam Bondi does. You know, you start to indict Fauci or something, that kind of makes you forget a little bit about Epstein. It's kind of like, you know, the next one. It's like, just get back out there and go get some other criminals. You'll get over her. You'll get over her. You'll get over her, Rob. You will. We can talk about Epstein. It's an analogy. I'm in a very happy relationship. Rapid response. The Autopen, I think, is maybe one of the biggest scandals, says Trump. In response to Biden, here's what the president said.
Look, the Autopen, I think, is maybe one of the biggest scandals that we've had in 50 to 100 years. This is a tremendous scandal. And I know the people on the other side of the, see that desk, that Resolute desk? Unfortunately, he used it before me. But, you know, we have our choice of 7 desks. They're all beautiful, but I chose the Resolute, and so did he, unfortunately. But the people on the other side of the Resolute desk, I know them. Lisa, the whole group, and they're no good. They're sick people. And I guarantee you he knew nothing about what he was signing. I guarantee it.
Now, he was gone. He didn't know what was happening around him most of the time. And Biden is, of course, gone and has been gone for some time. But another benefit of the Trump presidency has been that other people have also left the country, like Rosie O'Donnell.
Rosie O'Donnell, she went on Chris Cuomo's show recently. She blamed you for the fact that she's overweight, depressed, and drunk. What do you say to that? Do you think PDS is going to ever be a DSM-5 diagnosis?
I don't know about Rosie. I watch Rosie. Rosie's a mess.
she's a mess. But she left our country, which is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Only Rosie O'Donnell. Remember those words? Which shocked the nation during the first presidential debate with President Trump. Coming full circle. Rosie O'Donnell's in Ireland. And I guess she's overweight, depressed, and drunk. So maybe the Irish can help. All right, my friends, what a beautiful stream it has been. If you're just joining us, quick recap on what we talked about. We had a good Supreme Court update and a win. We got a very short decision from SCOTUS. We read through a little bit of Sotomayor's dissent to see what they're so upset about, but they're losing now. Maybe another 1,300 Department of Education bureaucrats, thanks to the Supreme Court stopping a decision from this foreign-born judge from South Korea who is now reversed, essentially. He said Trump couldn't fire these people. Now the Supreme Court says you can, and so they are going to presumably be gone in short order. And we already saw some nice freeing of their futures, okay? They're not being fired, okay? Their futures have been freed. And now they can go do whatever they want and be civil servants frolicking in the dewy meadows for the rest of their time. So we talked about that. Now, we also had Ghislaine Maxwell. She's going up to the Supreme Court of the United States and submitted this. Her petition to the Supreme Court, the DOJ came back down today and submitted their response. So this is Pam Bondi, D. John Sauer, and the rest of the DOJ saying, Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction is valid, it should stay, and you should not reverse it or even hear this case at all, Supreme Court. And I think the Supreme Court will probably affirm the conviction, but there is a possibility that it goes the other way. And boy, if it did, oh my gosh, we'll be in for a nuclear bomb, politically speaking. We also then saw, I think the Israelis, or I don't know if Naftali speaks for all Israelis. I don't think so, but I think he's saying he does. Former Prime Minister, he says, there's a vicious wave of slander about people who are asking about Epstein and Mossad. And he says against his country, and they're just not going to take it anymore. We just won't. We just won't take it anymore, says the Israeli Prime Minister. Tucker Carlson, not happy about that. I also don't really appreciate that type of language when we are allowed to ask questions about things. But all right, anyways. So that happened. We also saw they're denying all connections with Epstein and Ghislaine, apparently, even though they're not saying her name. But we saw there's a lot of evidence that there are Israeli intelligence connections to both Epstein and to Ghislaine, in spite of the fact they keep saying the same thing over and over again. How about a shred of evidence? There's a lot of it. You just can't keep saying that without actually looking for the evidence. Just go look for it. You'll find it. But they don't want to talk about it. They just say there's no shred of evidence on refrain over and over and over again. Kay Hunt, I think is her name, over on CNN. Didn't watch much of her because of how she presents herself and the things she says. Trump also posted one of the weirdest posts we've seen from him. And I think the takeaway is that he made the decision. Don't blame Pam. Don't blame Kash. Don't blame Dan. You may have disliked their rollout, but the rollout was probably reversed by Trump, saying, okay, your phase 2 through 7, you're not getting those. Okay, those files are not coming out. And that 1 minute in that video, cut it out. For whatever reason, Trump has made that decision, and I think he's taking ownership of it, saying, essentially, leave Pam Bondi alone. And how can you blame Pam if she was doing what the president told her to do? She's being a good soldier. So then the next question goes up to the president, and people will be making their decisions on that one. We also saw Ghislaine might be wanting to talk to Congress. We'll see if that happens or not. Many people, I think, could blow the lid off this thing with a little bit of bravery. Democrats latching onto it, but we saw Mark Wayne Mullen is explaining the Democrats could have released this if they wanted to. And the New York Times released a big expose, I would say, on Biden saying, well, Joe just kind of admitted orally that he wanted certain things to be done. Then 2 Democrat hacks would just take it and relay like a game of telephone to the aides, and then the aides would document it and then start to paper the file after the fact. And so who did what and when, and which of those decisions are valid and invalid? Congress is going to continue to look into it. James Comer, Trump says the Autopen scandal is a big deal, and they're going to get to the bottom of it. And of course, we'll keep our eye on all of it as well. But now, my friends, it is time to hear from you. What a beautiful day it is. Happy Monday. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. Thank you for subscribing to our channel if you have not done so already. We'd love to see you back here. We go live 5-6 days a week. And we'd love it if you joined us back here. And what's up, Donut? Clipping for us on the day. Thank you, Donut. We appreciate you. Thank you for doing this. We got a bunch of membos coming in as well. It's a little bit of a Monday mood. Womp, that cat. It's Monday. What time is it? Is it time to go home yet? Arnold Newton. What's up, Arnold? Hey, 17 months as a membo. Says, when is the world's sanity coming back? Shaking my head. I want peace. I'm with you, Arnold, man. We all want a little peace in this life, you know. Hopefully very soon. Hopefully very soon. Pinochet's Helicopter Tours. What's up? All these fired federal employees can pick our food under armed guard. See, I just solved the migrant farm labor problem too. I don't know that they need to be armed. I mean, if they really want a job, they'll go, yeah, there's plenty of work in this country. Just got to go find it. You're not entitled to a government position. You've been deemed non-essential. You have 14 days to slow the stop of your bank account draining. Clark Blount, what's up? Who will fill jobs in D.C.? I guess we need more illegal aliens, don't we, Clark? Thank you, Clark. Chubby Stubby, what's up? With honor and dignity as they hold a public wine session right out front. Yeah, and normally the people who have to label themselves and define themselves as, you know, having honor and dignity don't, right? They don't. So I think you're talking about the fired State Department officials all going out there crying in each other's arms. They don't get fired. Government employees have never been fired. They don't have to change jobs or anything. They're just there for life because they think they're entitled forever. Former LEO. Maybe those Department of Education employees can learn to code. It's much easier now, especially with Claude Code and Google CLI and stuff, or Gemini CLI. It's wild out there. According to Mushbrain Biden, it's easy peasy. It is a lot easier now with AI too. They can learn. It's not that complicated. Like, they can go learn. You can learn to code. Don't. If Bondi baits Maxwell into talking for 20 to 40 million and a new identity, then all bets are off. And all Trump DOJ sins are forgiven. Yeah, I mean, that would be a big deal. That would be a big deal. And I think ultimately Bondi could walk back that memo if she comes out and says, we got a bunch of new evidence, this new tranche of this, that, and the other. But unless there is a major cause for a change, it's pretty locked in. Off-label podcast, what's up? Says, hey, I meant to say this earlier, but I feel Bondi must go. It seems to me all she wants to do is be in front of a camera and not do her job. Well, she hasn't been in front of the camera that much lately, as of late, and she probably won't be for the foreseeable future. I bet that strategy changes moving forward, okay? I bet Bondi's a lot less camera friendly, at least for the foreseeable future. But my question on this one, it's like, there's a lot of people who are mad at Pam Bondi. I get it. If you think that she said she had stuff that she didn't, and was like lying about that or just idiotic about it, oh, it's on my desk and all those things. If you think she didn't have those, then yeah, she really botched that. If there really was no evidence. But if there was evidence and she was going to release it and she was working on all of it, and then Trump said, no, you're not, you're done, and overrode her, how can you be mad at Bondi for that if she's just a good soldier? Would you think she should have done what Dan did, essentially? Dan, you could say, rejected that. Dan was the one who said, I'm not going to just go along and get along, apparently. Threw a fit about it. And they made the decision. Trump came out and said, actually, I'm siding with Pam Bondi. And we talked about that in a prior video about the hierarchy, right? The Attorney General is way higher than the Deputy Director of the FBI, like way higher. So Trump, even politically speaking, Trump, like there's different layers to leadership. Like, you've got your administrative responsibilities, you've got your moral responsibilities, you've got your practical responsibilities. Like, you might want to go do these things, but you have to do these things first. And so that's governance. And Trump made his decision, but how can you blame and Dan Bongino too? Like, if Dan leaves and comes back to his podcast or whatever, like, there's a lot of people talking like Dan's audience will never forgive him. They'll think they were betrayed in all this. And I'm thinking, how is that? What? Even if Bongino sticks around, like he's just being a good soldier, he's deferring to the chain of command. It's the president. None of them are the president. And so if they're screwing up and they're harming the president against his will, they're the problem. But if the president is saying, do this and then stop doing that and do this other thing, and they all got kind of hung out to dry on that, now they all reverse course to be in alignment with the president's wishes. It's just how leadership is, it's just how it goes. And then you got to make the judgment call on Trump and why he did, why he made that call. What are the benefits to the administration? Who does it benefit? What foreign intelligence agencies does it benefit? Ravicus, what do you think about the Convention of the States? Do you think it will be needed in the future to decide new terms? Well, see, my concern about really anything like that is what will it look like? There's a huge portion of our country that has no understanding of our Constitution at all, or the three branches of government or how anything works. So now we're going to bring a bunch of people together. You really risk having a lot of charlatans. If you have a Convention of the States, you can rewrite the whole Constitution. Like in a flurry of majority rule tyranny. What if they come in and say, you know what, we're going to have socialism now, and it captures the attention in this Convention of the States, and all the populous states come in, and we have these new rules, these new rules, and all the New Yorkers, and they come in, and California takes over, and we have a little socialist hellhole. Like, there's a lot of risk to that. I like our current Constitution. I think that we should push to revert more back to that, into a freer society that is more in alignment with the values and principles that made the country great, rather than all this inflated law, money, media, relationships, culture. It's all been inflating over the last several years. We need to bring it back to form. Doan, who said prosecuting Epstein raises too many foreign intelligence issues? Was it Acosta, his defense team, or the prosecutor? So I think the FBI reported in a document that Acosta said it. And there were other reports that Acosta said it too. I think there's another report. So an FBI agent said in a written report that the U.S. attorney told him something like that. There was in one document that we reviewed here, I think last week. Then there was also another story that Acosta told the Trump transition team about that they asked him, why didn't you do anything with Epstein? He said, I was told it was intelligence and I let it go. So that was also reported. So I think the sources were Acosta, predominantly, the prosecutor who was representing the DOJ. Richard Waring, if Maxwell wins, would her evidence have to be released? No, I don't think so at all. In fact, I think the opposite, right? If she's exonerated, then you would say she was wrongfully prosecuted under that non-prosecution agreement. She should not have had criminal charges because she was covered. And the file should be sealed because she has a presumption of innocence. Could you imagine? Oh my gosh. Sev Russ, what's up? Sev Russ in the house, bringing in 5 new membos. Thank you, Sev. We've got Joel Valachi coming in. What's up, Adam? Veg Scrog Bloom is here. Ron Hastings, welcome. Linda G, all gifted membos, courtesy of Sev Russ. We love you, Sev. Thank you for that. Clark Blount, what's up, Clark? 20 membos coming in here from Clark Blount. Clark, you're the man. Look who's here. David Macy, what's up, Ricochet? Buddy 305 Love, Black Swan Socials. Tyler's here. Land That I Love. We got Greg Silverado, XRP Panic, Keith Bradbury, LTC Vet. What's up, Jay Liebgott? Chief Vince, Bravo 6. UMC Medic is here. Fallen Angel, Crimson Decade. What's up, June Love? Christo Bruyans. We got James Lowe and Battle Elf, all gifted membos, courtesy of Clark Blount. Thank you, Clark. And he also says, yeah, dirty animals. Member for 4 months. Thank you, Clark. That reminds me of that scene from Home Alone. Keep the change, you filthy animals. Leonard S. Nobody believes Biden carefully supervised and the use of the Autopen. Biden had very little to do with the Autopen. I think that's right. I think you're confirmed. You're confirmed. That has been confirmed by the New York Times. He had conversations with 2 high-level staff, and then the staff told other staff, and then they memorialized it. So what is the record between Biden and the first 2 people? There is none. Chubby, nothing says you're innocent, like screaming in public that you are indeed innocent and pitching a toddler's fit. Yeah, I don't know what you're referencing there, Chubby, but it certainly sounds like that might be the Israeli prime minister screeching about this. We're not going to take it anymore. What? Conversations about Your intelligence agencies? Okay. Former LEO says, big boy, I just had an alert pop up on my check register about an outstanding check. And it says, I went back and found a check written to you for transcripts and mailed to your law office in 2022. I just voided the check and moved on, but then I noticed that my subscription was coming due, and after being a member for 5 years, I was forced to renew. Here's to another 5 years at least. Well, former, I don't know what happened with all that, but I do appreciate you becoming a membo again. And first of all, thanks for even sending a check to our law office. It's very generous of you. Apologies for the trouble having to void a check and all that. But thank you for trying to donate to our transcripts. It was very nice of you to do that. Former, thanks for being here, man. We're glad to have you as a membo. Cheers to another 5 years and many more to come. Pinochet's helicopter tour says Maxwell was oft in Spain. Odd. John McAfee got schwacked in Spain too. Yeah, John McAfee. That guy was on a whole different level. Pinochet's helicopter tour says, I would like to believe my ex posts that were very harsh on Dan's character caused him to find his principle. I would be happy if Dan is standing up for himself. Well, I think there's probably some truth to that. Like, we saw Dan. He was posting some stuff. He's not posting much anymore, but he was posting some stuff, trying to like post through it, right? And just keep posting 900 pounds of meth. We're getting other pedophiles, women and girl sports, or men and girl sports, like all the things. They were working real hard. Comer is working on things. We're going to find Comey, Brennan. We're going to look into all of them. And I think the feedback was, we don't really care about all your shiny objects and distractions. We want what you said you were going to do. And that was showing up in the comments. I am divine creation. Why are we reporting CNN fake news? Because it's the only one that had an article about it. I've seen Cash report that he will serve at the pleasure of the president. Yeah, I mean, I report the stories that exist, essentially. So CNN was the one who had sources who wrote the story. So I'm sharing it with you. Of course, you're free to take it for what it's worth, as I would encourage you to do with everything we share here. Just look at the source, use your own judgment, and we'll share the stories and you can decide whether to believe it or not. So that's kind of the format we use here. I am Divine Creation. Sometimes we read Fox News stories and sometimes we read CNN stories, just depends. Pinochet. So can we expect, thank you for the dono. I am Divine Creation. Very nice. Pinochet's helicopter tour. So we can expect an unsigned DOJ memo in about a year saying the 2020 election is not prosecutable. There is no there. Yeah, I mean, hopefully this is not a pattern, but yeah, we wake up, just another memo. The pipe bomber was not Liz Cheney. Ray Epps was a good person and not connected with anything. The list goes on and on. I'm an American man. Says, we the people want the Epstein files on our desk by Friday at 8 a.m. Which is very generous of you. That's like a full week to get it. I was thinking like tomorrow by noon. What's up, Clark Blount? Clark, thank you for this. We got 50 new membos coming in, my friends. Let's welcome them aboard. American Jane is here. What's up, Raven Fear? Carl Swelling, Britt Cormier, Alien Robot Ghost, Nana, Tom is here. AB, Audie Joe, Porchview, RD. What's up, Sean? Scott, Howard, Molina, Long Reach, DC's here. Lazul, Trish, Tomaz, JC, Lucky Lady. What's up, Rory? Nancy, Assorted Weirdness is here. Ed Rooney, Cindy, Heath, Ramona. What's up, Nobody? We got Joel, Joe, Shelly, Open, American Jane. What's up, William, Otaku, Peter, Dwayne, USA, Tsunami's here. Blah, Giloso, welcome. Lennon, Short Bus, Zendow, Nancy McShane, PJ's Rat Rods, whatever guy, James Hare, Lillian May, Speak Life, and Grouchy Mama Bear. All gifted membos, courtesy of Clark Blount. Clark, thank you for doing that. He says, good night, you animals. Rao, you can now troll the chat now. Clark Blount, thank you, my friend. Bon voyage. Have a beautiful night. Thanks for bringing in a bunch of new membos. Can't wait to see and meet our new membos. Hey, Ray K, check this one out. 41 months as a membo. Golly, that's amazing, Ray K. Thanks for being here for so long. That's a long time. Hey, Trump ran on it. It split the base. Fix it now, Trump. I think he's not, it's done. I think he's saying move on. and we're supporting Pam, and Dan might stick around too, is what it sounds like. Because Trump made a decision, whatever the reason was, and they're all going to be good soldiers. What's up? King of Biltong is here. You know Biltong, biltongusa.com. Check them out. You can use code Robert, 10% off over there. No additives, none of that garbage. It's naturally air-dried and delicious. biltongusa.com. Get your meat. James Marino says, investigating, thank you, James, for this one, says, investigating Biden deep state judicial corruption is intellectual masturbation. Feels good, but it never produces anything. Lerner, Strzok, laptop, FISA, illegals, federal rules of civil procedure, ad infinitum. What laws do I get to break? Well, James, I don't know. If you're a U.S. citizen, then none. If you're an illegal alien, you can basically do whatever you want. Or if you're a Democrat FBI agent, there's certain categories. If you're a Democrat lawyer, Democrat politician, a corrupt FBI agent, or a corrupt bureaucrat, then, or an illegal alien, you're basically immune from the laws. But if you're President Trump, you get prosecuted for opening a door. Arch Lord Dune Rider, James Marino. It's really, I think, an astute point, because you're right about this. And when we start to see this indicia of prosecutions for Brennan or Comey or any of those people, we go, come on. They're not going to go after Epstein or anyone connected to him, and then we turn around and expect that they're going to go after a former CIA director? That does not compute. So it does feel like it's just a bunch of talk about nothing. Archlord Dune Rider. What's up, Archlord? Says Biden did a phone interview. AI has been impersonating Rubio. Why not impersonate Biden in the New York Times? Especially if it was only 10 minutes. Yeah, that's a good point. Hopefully they validated that. Or the truth is, I don't think any AI can be so dumb. You know, like AI is pretty intelligent, most of it. Like their voice models are pretty good. So in other words, could they have an AI? They would just say, hey, talk like you have like 50 less IQ points than a normal president. The AI is like, oh, like Joe Biden, no problem. We got a model for that right now. We were using it for the last 4 years. Hey, the Bronx. Yeah, and that did happen with Rubio, and they've got, they got mechanisms like safe words and stuff they use. The Bronx, hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Pam Bondi involved in cutting that original deal with Epstein in Florida? So she would have been the state attorney general, which generally is not involved in a lot of that type of stuff. Like the attorney general is going to be different than a county prosecutor, which was probably what those local cops were, county or state. I'm sorry, like county would be the state, but county or city prosecutors may have been the ones who were on the Epstein case. Pam, I think, would have been the AG. I don't know if that time period overlapped. She might have had some incidental connections to it, or maybe she was more involved, but I think it's not exactly in her jurisdiction. So it's like the U.S. Attorney's Office in Florida. She would be the state level attorney general, but the attorneys general generally are not too involved in criminal prosecutions. They're involved in more of the civil stuff, right? At the top, they can be, but generally their responsibilities are much broader than just criminal law. But it's a great question to Bronx. Yeah. Jackie Silly Me Carry On says, big beat bill passed because Epstein list lost. Just shush. From Jackie. Thank you, Jackie, for being a member for 26 months. So you think that the bill, the big beautiful bill, was a condition, Epstein was a condition of the big beautiful bill? This old guy says by the time that late night meeting ended at 10:28 p.m. was over, Biden had already been asleep for 2 hours. Yeah, at least. Yeah, I think he has his final scoop of ice cream about 7:30, so that's about right. This old guy. Thank you for that one. Chubby, for somebody who left the U.S. to get away from Trump, Rosie sure does talk about him a lot. Well, I think many of them, their entire basis of existence is just to be mad at Trump. I don't know what they would do without. What are they going to do without Trump? They have no purpose anymore at all. Concert chick, watch your family. Hey, please keep me in your prayers, my friends. Concert chick, you got it. I have to go back to the hospital for a routine procedure tomorrow. I'm really nervous seeing how the last routine procedure landed me in the hospital for a week. Thank you. Love y'all. So Concert Chick, you've got our prayers of good spirits and high energy and healing efforts tomorrow. And we are pretty sure that you got the bad one out of the way already. Okay, so that's done. You got that, it's over with. The last one was, it's actually going to be routine right now. There's always a fluke. Flukes happen every now and then. But this next one's going to be perfect and great. And you're going to have the amazing care of the doctors watching over you and bringing you back to pure health. And we're excited for that. Hopefully it goes well, Concert Chick. We're going to send some love and energy your way. Thanks for stopping by and saying what's up about that so we can send some love. Hey, Susanna, on Rumble today, a 6-minute Stephen Miller interview on the Mark Levin show. Truly excellent. Love Stephen Miller. Wouldn't want to be on his bad side. Stephen Miller's great. And I'm curious what they were talking about. Yeah, Mark Levin has also been very animated about Tucker Carlson. It's been an interesting one. Hey, Ravicus, I think that Trump is concerned that if he reveals all the evidence, his plans for the presidency will be jeopardized because we will be losing many people in Congress. He needs to maintain the status quo to get his agenda passed, right? It might be that. But then you have to ask yourself, is that worth covering up a global pedophile ring? And maybe it is. Maybe Trump has said, look, it's done. Like, that's done. That's not happening anymore. Justice is served enough. And actually, I don't know what the justification is for it. But do you like, we talked about this analogy this morning on the members only stream, this hypothetical. What if, right? So like, this is a great reason. We have to ask ourselves, what is the harm that Trump is trying to avoid from his perspective behind the Resolute desk? What if, and I don't think this is going to happen, but what if this was the case? Like if Trump releases the Epstein files, there's a risk to that, right? Probably. Why they're not releasing it. So what is the risk? Let's just make one up and just say it's really bad. If we release the Epstein files, what happens if some entity is threatening to set off a nuclear bomb in a major American city? You release the files, we launch a nuke. Now Trump is sitting there at the Resolute desk. I've got good evidence they're going to launch a nuke or set off a nuke in an American city, but I also have to release these Epstein files because these are like, it's a global PDF file ring. What do we do? Well, you can't release the files. Otherwise, the bomb will go off and people will die. And so, okay, so then the other response is, okay, so we have to just like hang around with this threat and this trade-off. Like if we have this go out, this other bad thing is going to happen. Or how about we just say, we're not going to operate under those terms anymore. Okay, so if there's going to be harm or damage caused by something that we have control over, we just need to get it out right now. Like we need to purge the system at this moment. This is the time. Like this is the agenda, right? How can you have an agenda? Do you want to live in a country where your agenda is based on a global oligarchy of people who can get away with whatever they want all the time? How is that good? So at that point, I think you say, well, yeah, I mean, if this is the right thing to do, you release it in spite of whatever threats and in spite of whatever harm comes, because it's the right thing to do for all the reasons we've articulated. Sheila Poo. Hey, what's up? Love you, Rob, and this Watching the Watchers family. We love you back, Sheila Poo. Thanks for hanging with us. I know some of this Epstein stuff has been uncomfortable. A lot of people trying to kind of work their way through it. A lot of people don't want to put the final decision-making power on Trump, but I think he put it on himself in his own post. People trying to be clever out there. It's like, well, Pam's terrible, but Trump's amazing. It's like, well, Trump ordered Pam to do the thing. So we're trying to make sense of it. A lot of it doesn't make sense. And that makes us believe that there's a missing piece of the puzzle there. It's like we can see something should be there, but it's not. So what is it? And if you trust Trump and you want to defer to his judgment, that's what this is. It's a judgment call, and he made it. Pinochet says, Rob, the armed guards are to make sure the fired federal employees work off the money they stole from the taxpayers. Oh, got it. So it's not a like I thought they were just going to go voluntarily get a job. Like, no. It's penal farming is what it is. Sheila Poo, hey, more prayers coming out. Over for your future son-in-law. He works as a data analyst in DC, and his company just notified them 600 layoffs are coming. My daughter is a teacher, so we'll make living there tough without a salary. Man, I'm sorry to hear that, Sheila Poo. Yeah, I wonder what that's about. But I'm sure he's a very sharp dude, and I'm sure he's going to find something else out there as a data analyst in the DC area. There's a lot of data over there and they need analysts. So hopefully he finds another place to go. We're going to be sending some good love and energy his way. Shout out to your daughter. Thanks to your daughter for teaching the youth of America. We appreciate her. And we know that they're going to persevere. These are setbacks, but they'll be stronger for it. Thank you, Sheila. We'll send some prayers. What's up? Generic Derek says Bill Barr's dad has written a book called Space Relations. It's a sci-fi novel about controlling a planet via PDF-based blackmail. He also essentially founded the CIA too, right? Bit weird. Bill Barr's dad did? Man, I didn't know anything about that. That's interesting. Thank you, Generic Derek, for that one. Not generic at all. Hey, this old guy. In the real world, when you get fired, you get your personal stuff in a box. Then you leave the building. They walk you out. You don't hang around on the sidewalk complaining to passersby that you just got fired. Well, in their defense, they've never been fired before. They've never had to change jobs or like have a difficult conversation with a superior or decide to quit or anything. Because they've just been there forever. Just sucking off the government teat at our expense. So now it's a new experience for them. And they're perpetual victims. So this will make their lives much more exciting. Pinochet's, and they'll have like little text groups and they'll form support groups, and all the State Department firees will be like the class of 2025. It's going to be hilarious. Hey, Pinochet, unfortunately, if there is a convention of the states, Massachusetts will not choose to send me. You're going to get a commie. See, that's the problem. We're going to who's going to go to the convention of the states? This could be a real big risk. Tony Hay Muckets. Thank you, Tony Hay, for bringing in more membos. 10 new membo friends. Join us for the after parties. We are going to hang out after we're done here. We got this. Fonzie's here. Jay Sauce. What's up, Jack Graham? Spidey fan. Big Money. What's up, Scott? Shinobu Tezuka. James, Andrea's Smilin, and Charlie Lex. All gifted membos courtesy of Tony Hay Munkets. Thank you, Tony Hay, for bringing in 10 new friends to join us. Hey, Dave H. on Rumble. Thank you to our Rumble friends. Says, on Barry Cunningham's podcast on Saturday, and he was of the opinion that the whole blow has been allowed to create an environment where a special prosecutor could be appointed. Yeah, but I think that requires, I think you're talking about the Epstein stuff, right? I think that requires Trump to want that to happen. And I don't get the sense that Trump wants that to happen at all. And a special prosecutor would then come out and probably deliver a report, in part, that would undermine everything that Pam Bondi just put in that memo, which probably came from Trump at some level. Somebody said, you're done talking about this, so just put it in a memo and publish it. Get it out. So Pam Bondi and the rest of them did it. That's all. So why would they now say, actually, reopen it? I don't think they're going to. Pinochet says, look up William Colby. That is how they get rid of problematic CIA directors. William Colby. Looks like a good recommendation. They throw him off a yacht. Tony Hay Muckets. What's up? 10 more friends coming in. Thank you, Tony Hay. 10 more membos. Laura Powers. What's up, Three Finger Clay? Unit is here. Marco, Air Force vet. Welcome. Thank you, sir. Gizzards is here. We got Okie Dairy Goat Farm, Penny Kuzul, Christopher Reed, and Big Merciful. All gifted membos in the house. Yeah, and Bill Dozer, I think it's exactly right. If a system is built on pillars of pedophilia, it should crumble. I agree. A phoenix shall rise from the ashes, no status quo. If I'm the president and I'm sitting there, I'm saying, wait a minute. If we release these Epstein files, the risk is someone's going to set off a nuke in America because of that. Whatever the risk is, whatever the damage, make it bigger than a nuke, make it smaller than a nuke. I don't, play with the hypothetical variables. But what would your decision be? And if you, and of course, if you thought that Epstein was just a regular PDF file and him and Ghislaine were alone and there was no broader conspiracy here at all, then I think the decision would be clear on something like that, right? That you would say, oh, obviously, we don't need to release the records or some meaningless situation and risk all of these other things. And we're not in the position to really make the judgment on either of those variables, like what's actually in there, we don't know. And what is the risk of releasing it and being transparent about it, we don't know. But from my perspective, if there is a risk for releasing it, it's almost like you need to know. It's like we want to get that out. We want to experience whatever that is. Whatever the blowback's going to be, We want it. It's deserved because it's a rot that needs to be purged from the entire system. Democracy Manifest says POTUS never spoke about him or the files. He did not run on it. Within a week of the memo, base divided while the Autopen goes under the rug. It's no coincidence. It's also an interesting thing, right? It's a wedge issue, lots of wedge issues in politics, and both sides latch onto them and exploit them. And we do it too. We say, oh, the Democrats, man, for example, the Israel-Palestine thing, huge wedge issue for Democrats, and Republicans are taking advantage of that. Democrats doing the same thing. There's a big Epstein divide on this. And I think that you can think that there is a cover-up and still be supportive of Trump in politics. Like, it's very Machiavellian. And I know that it's hard to analyze politics like that, but it's brutal. Like, it's brutal. It's the hardest game on the planet, right? It's the most important game on the planet. And so you have to make these strategic decisions about where to prioritize your effort and resources and your relationships and your allies and all the things. So it does feel certainly like the Democrats, I think as of today, Hakeem, they are using it as a wedge and they're going to continue to exploit it as a wedge. I think that you can become a victim to that. And my question has been, do you abandon Trump, your guy, for the next 3.5 years? And if that results in a Democrat victory that ultimately ends up in more Democratic policies that hurt your life, is that the right strategic decision for the time being? You might not be 100% happy with Trump if it goes from 100 to 70%. When do you drop below that threshold, though? Like, where is that for people? I don't know. FD Man, how to fire someone with his box of stuff and escort out of the building from Scrooge, 1998. It's a movie clip. I'll let you watch that one. We'll get a copyright strike on that. But yeah, you get your bags and you get out. They walk you to the door. Don't touch anything. No emails, nothing. Drop it. Get out. Bruce Koritz, Trump has not said if he told Pam to drop it. Trump has not said that he told Pam to drop it. No, he didn't say that unequivocally, but this post is pretty clear. Pam Bondi is doing a fantastic job because she just dropped it. And I don't like what's happening. It's perfect. They created the files, no matter how much we do. Let Bondi do her job. In other words, she's great. The fact that she dropped the Epstein thing is great. It was rigged and stolen, and we got other things to worry about, but don't blame Pam, right? And if Pam was going to be the sacrificial lamb because she did something that Trump didn't want her to do, he would have not posted this. So I think he's endorsing and adopting her decision as his own. Yeah. Which begs the question as to why. Bruce, thank you for that, Bruce. So I think you're right. He didn't explicitly say, I ordered Pam Bondi to drop it, but she dropped it, and she didn't for a while, right? She was actually saying she's got all the records and all the files on her desk. Yeah. Hey, Rob, that Epstein book is huge. It's got 2 volumes even. There's another book. This one's from Whitney Webb. One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Shred of evidence. They keep asking for that. Well, I'd just like a shred of evidence. Maybe if Tucker had a shred of evidence. He's talked about it on like 100 podcasts as of now. Jody, what's up? Hey, finally catching a live again. Hit that plus button. God bless. God bless you, Josie. Thank you for that. Yeah, I know, man. We were at the South Rim at the Grand Canyon over the weekend. We looked at some photos of that this morning too. It's great. But the North Rim Lodge burned to the ground, man. And in our videos, even on the weekend, you could see it, the smoke on the other side of the canyon. It was a wild scene. And we actually, at night, you could see the flames from across the canyon. You could actually visually see the flames of the fire on the other end of the canyon. I'll see if I can find a picture on that. Hey, Shell Davis, what's up? Good to see you. Thank you for saying what's up. What's up? Pro One Bro. Hi, watchers. What's up, Dog Backwards? Says, what applicable standard would apply to the president's signature on a legal document? There are many situations in which a witness is required for certain legal documents. Seems to be an interesting question. It is a good question. Why would the legal standard for a president's signature be less than a normal citizen? Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Also considering like what is the chain of custody? Like you go in, you sign something, at a bank or something, like they got a notary there to make sure it's you and you signed it at that time. But the president doesn't. He just has some rambling ice cream sessions with some officials and that's it. Darby Shaw, Rob, not sure if you're old enough to remember the feud between Trump and Rosie. At one point, Trump said Rosie should shut her fat, ugly face. I almost fell out of my chair. It was epic. It's true. She didn't, unfortunately. Darby says, if you watch Hakeem, his speech and body language are exactly like Obama. I know. That's why I keep saying, why does he keep talking like that? Just be yourself, Hakeem. You're not Barack Obama, okay? And you try to emulate Barack Obama, then you sound ridiculous. B. Torn, why would Ghislaine Maxwell need a publishing company? She already had her own punishing company. But amazing. Thank you, B. Torn, for that one. And my friends, great to see you on the X platform. Love seeing you over there. And let's see, I think we got do we have anybody watching over on Twitch right now? I can't, I just opened it, so I can't see if you're in there. Well, shout out to our friends on Twitch. We had a couple people just follow us over there. And we're trying to, if you're watching on Twitch, we're going to see if we can get enough activity so that we can turn on membership streams over there for our Amazon friends if you're watching on Twitch. All right, so we got that. I think we're also over on Kick now if you prefer to watch over there. Hey, Kick! Spam in the chat. All right, got it. All right, so it's good to see everybody, my friends. And of course, shout out to our friends on Rumble. And thank you for watching over there. I see Duck Fats over there and some amazing friends. All right, so my friends, we'll leave it there on the day. We are going to pause for the evening. We're going over to our members-only after party, watching thewatchers.locals.com or Membos on YouTube. Hit the refresh button on the main channel homepage, and we'll see you back for the after party. But it's going to be a beautiful week ahead, my friends. I can feel it in my bones. We're going to have some great streams, and I can't wait to see you back here on the next one. So we'll pause for the evening. Before we wrap up, I want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths. Shout out to Donut, John for clipping for us today, Carrie B, K Bean, our friends Janek, Dog Digger, and Neuro D on the Rumbles. Shout out to Just Rhonda, Jigum, and Elliot, and everyone who helps keep this show on track. We appreciate you. But my friends, we'll pause here for the evening. And of course, we'll come back tomorrow and we're going to get into it again. But in order to do that appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through the scripted ruse. Together we are watching the watchers shine in the light. Watching the watchers defending what's right. Watching the watchers each night together and live.